to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
Let's talk about what you learned from Ray, because that was one of the things I definitely wanted to get into, because you spent a lot of time there. Rub shoulders with Ray a lot, and you sent me your blog post and what you had written. Is that on your blog, by the way?
It is, yeah.
And if someone wants to Google that, what are they Googling? What I learned from Ray Ortlund?
I think so. I think if you Google that.
So if someone
my name
Googles
and Google that
what I learned
whatever.
from Ray Ortlund and David McLemore, they'll be able to find it.
Yeah.
But let's talk. I'd love to talk through it. What were some of the things that you learned from Ray?
Oh, man. There's so many that I didn't put in there that I learned from him. But, it's hard. I think the way you said it in the email originally when you asked me to come here was it's hard to be around Ray and not learn something from him. I think is the way you said it. And it's so true because he's always teaching. And some of that's intentional. A lot of it is unintentional. It's just who he is.
Agreed.
But so I learned things like, this is one I didn't put in the article, but it came to mind as I was thinking about this on the way here. I remember one of my first experiences of Ray in the early days of Emmanuel, and Janie has talked about this because she did the same thing here. But I remember showing up and Ray coming out of the bathroom with like a pail of cleaning supplies, and I remember thinking, Ray Ortlund is cleaning bathrooms. And there was something about that it told me the kind of pastor he was.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing related to that, it was when I was going through officer training. And so I'd been there for a while, and we all go up into a room upstairs in that granny white building. And he said, I'll be up there in a minute. And we all go in and we sit down. And he comes in and he turns on the lights and opens the blinds and sits down, and he says, I can't help but notice that when I came in here, the room was completely unprepared for us to talk. The lights weren't on. The shades were drawn. One of the things about being an officer at Emmanuel is you have to always be thinking, how can I best care for these people? Some simple things like turning on the lights and opening the blinds help people feel loved. And I remember thinking, that was not even a category in my mind, right?
Yes.
Like that's just, but those kinds of things told me that the heart that this man has. He's not just a theological genius, though he is.
Yes.
He's a pastor.
Yes.
He knows how to care for people in ways that aren't even obvious to them, but that ways that when they experience it, they feel loved by it.
Yes.
Those kinds of things I've carried those with me.
That I remember that popping up in officer training when I went through it too. And the one thing that he has mentioned a couple of times is if he's kind of walking into church and there's a piece of trash on the floor, he's going to feel obligated to pick up that piece of trash.
That's right.
You know, Emmanuel has these they're the size of a business card that kind of has the Emmanuel branding on one side. On the second side, on the other side, it has the Emmanuel mantra,
right?
Which is, I'm a complete idiot. My future is incredibly bright. Anyone can get in on this. And, you know, we have them, or at least used to in the cafe, on these little double-sided card holders that you can just grab and go. Well, if he sees one that's upside down, like he's going to want to turn it right side up. And he's just asking like, hey, officers, could you join with me? If you see trash, pick it up. Take some ownership. If you see one of these things that's upside down, make it go the right way. Mm-hmm. You know, like all those. Yeah, I think that is that idea of properly preparing and showing love to people by our actions and making it seem like, yeah, we expected you. We're glad you're here.
Right.
That is, man, that's so key. How would you describe, and let's get to some more there, but how would you describe, because we should kind of follow our own advice here, in that some people are listening to this and they've never heard of Ray. They have no idea.
Yeah, that's right.
So how would you describe Ray Ortlund? Like, why should people care what we learn from this guy?
Ray Ortlund is, when I think about a pastor, I think about Ray. And what I mean by that is Ray is, no one loves the Bible like Ray does. I don't know anyone who loves the Bible the way Ray does. So what you're getting from Ray's ministry is not Ray's thoughts about God. What you're getting from Ray's ministry is God's thoughts about God as revealed to us in the Bible. So I'm going to start there. Ray is theologically precise, nuanced, thinks through everything. But not only from the lens of what is the right technical stance to take here according to the Bible, but what is the heart of God here? And so when I think about why should people care about what Ray says, it's because Ray cares about what God says, particularly God's heart towards you. Who doesn't need that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, I need to know how God really feels about me.
Yep.
And Ray really cares about communicating that.
Mm-hmm.
And so from the start, that's why it matters.
Mm-hmm.
He matters. But beyond that, he loved, I say loved because he's retired from pastoral ministry. He loved being a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't imagine doing anything else. And he did do something else for a while. He was a professor for a while. And God called him out of that into the pastorate. And I see why, because Ray, he's not the most interpersonally, how do I say that? I don't know how to say it without being...
So his words,
yes,
I think are the best. He is... How did he put this? He is, well... Now I forget his words, but he is he's an introvert that's socially bold.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
And a lot of introverts don't enjoy small talk, aren't particularly good at small talk,
right?
Particularly intellectual introverts, because they're on a different level.
Mm-hmm.
And Ray's like that.
Yeah, he is. But my experience of Ray is I've always felt loved. I've never sat with anyone who I've felt more encouraged by than Ray. I can't leave a time with him where I don't feel like, gosh, I feel like I matter to God.
Exactly. Another way to put this would be if you want to talk about the last Formula One race or the last UFC fight or whatever you're into, the last football game.
Yeah.
Ray's not your guy.
No.
If you want to get an oil change on your soul, second to none.
Yeah, exactly. And you might not even know you needed any maintenance.
Exactly.
You just showed up for, I thought I was going to just filling up the tank.
Yeah, exactly.
All of a sudden I'm like,
yep.
Whoa.
I
got more than what I bargained for there.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Someone said, I don't know who this was, but this thought is not original with me, but Ray is like, and he would probably hate this, but
he would hate this whole conversation.
Yeah, he would. But he's like a present day Old Testament prophet.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. He takes God more seriously than anyone that I know.
He does.
And he has been a pastor since 1975. It's crazy to think. So when he retired September of last year, he'd been a pastor since 1975, which is, dude, I was not born until 84.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like he had 10 years on my life.
Yeah.
As a pastor. So he has all this experience. Extremely well educated, but doesn't want to be called doctor. And that's probably all, like, takes God more seriously than anyone I know. Extremely well educated, would hate to be called doctor. It's like, that's getting pretty close to, like, that gives you a pretty good indication of this guy.
It does, yeah. The fact that we sit here and talk about him as, we refer to him as Ray. Not even Pastor Ray or Dr. Ortlund or any of those. We use his name because he's our friend.
Exactly.
Right? And that's what you get with him, is you get a friendship.
Exactly. I think that we're not going to have any idea of the lifelong impact of his life and ministry until sometime after he's dead.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those situations where at some point after he's dead and gone, we're just going to realize a little bit more the impact that his ministry had. I mean, because it's very impactful.
Huge.
Now, and for the listeners, I mean, they're probably like, yeah, sure, this guy was both your pastors. I get that. Sure,
Right.
There's some pastoral bias here. I get it. I have a high regard for my own pastors. I think everyone should. So, all right, I'll give you that. But that's not all what we're talking about here.
Right.
There's something else going on with Ray.
Yeah.
So, one thing I learned, or just this is, in one of the learnings from Ray, I think, man, that his life to me is a testament that the gospel must be real.
Right.
And what I mean by that is this guy is highly intellectual, highly capable. He kind of poo-poos his organizational ability, prowess. I don't buy it totally. He's highly intellectual, highly capable.
Yeah, he is.
And he is a scholar, but it doesn't end there. His wisdom seeps out into organizational areas too. My point is, he could do about anything that he wanted to set his mind to. And of all of the options, all of the careers he could have had, again, this only works if someone's highly capable, highly intellectual, highly competent. Ray is that. Well, he chose to live his life in service of the gospel.
Right.
So to me, that's a living, breathing testament to the gospel. It adds credence to the gospel, then must be true, I guess. And it's not true because Ray's living his life in service of, obviously. But if the gospel is not true, Ray has wasted his life.
Right.
And he's kind of too smart to do that.
Yeah, and you kind of sense just being with him that there's no way he's wasted his life. And I don't mean that because of what he says or does, but of who he is.
Yes.
There is a seriousness, I'll even say it, a glory to Ray of, when in Acts they say that the apostles, they could tell that they had been with Jesus. That's how I feel about Ray.
Yes.
You can tell that he's been with Jesus. He is... he would hate us saying it this way, but he is not of this world. He is
agreed.
He is a witness to the grace of God. The glory of God is a real reality.
Yes,
he is transcendent. Maybe is a good word to use with Ray.
Yeah,
he is that, but not in a showy, uppity, snobbish kind of way. You don't feel that. I mean, this is a guy who, drives his truck, wears his camo. I don't know how many meetings I've been with him where he shows up in all of his camo. He's Ray, but he's not normal, but he is, there's a supernaturalness to him.
Yes.
Which is true of every Christian. I'm not saying he's some super Christian or, super apostle of some sort, but there is something about the grace of God is evident in Ray's life.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And that was another one that I had, that I would say is a big learning of mine, and that is the power of thinking biblically.
Yeah.
And by power, I mean the everyday usefulness of thinking biblically.
Yeah.
So that's from Ray. TJ does that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And John Farmer, a more recent pastor, which you wouldn't have overlapped with at Emmanuel, but John Farmer thinks biblically too. It's one of the things that first popped up when we were kind of having his interviews. But yeah, the idea of thinking biblically, being so saturated in the Word that it affects how you think.
Right.
I'm just a failure at that. You know what I mean? Like I have so far to go with that. I desire it because it has a lot of power, because if God did create this world and the universe and the earth, then he gave us the Bible, which is the inspired word of God. Then if he created these things, we should think that there's a way that works best.
Right.
And we're going to be able to glean a lot of insight on this way that works best through the inspired scripture, if that's the word of God or the words of God. So then if that's the case, then we shouldn't think, which I think often we tend to, that the Bible's kind of in a box or a category, but then there's everyday life over here. Mm-hmm. Well, no, if there is a design, a creator, then the Bible is the template, or it's the instruction, or it's the information you need for the everyday life. You know what I mean? They're not in separate categories.
Right. Yeah.
And just that way of, as you think biblically, it informs your conversations and your thoughts. Man, I really want to grow in that area big time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you're probably further along than you think you are.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that. But the way this plays out often, has happened with Ray, it's happened with TJ, is I will bring something up, and in my line of thinking is, here, right? And and we're there's a question or I'm bringing something up, and their answer is it's up here.
Yeah,
like it's at a different level. Like it's more base. It's where I should have been thinking to begin with. It's thinking biblically. That's what that is.
I know exactly what you mean. A story from my time at Emmanuel bears that out as well. I remember we were trying to think through how do we help our people understand the importance of giving to the local church. And so not only that, but just a broader way of like, how do we, Ray didn't preach on it a lot. So how do we build that into just the preaching schedule of, because Jesus talked about money a lot. So if we ignore this, we're not being biblical.
Yeah.
So it was a larger conversation, but one of the things I did was put together a proposal of here are some changes we could make. And I remember presenting that to the officers. We read through it. We talked through it. People chimed in, and I remember Ray saying, "David, this is great. This is so much in here. I think it would work. But I think any nonprofit could do this, and it would work." Where is God in this?
Yeah.
And it was so helpful to me. I didn't receive that as like, this is trash because of that.
Yeah.
It was, let's lift this even higher. Let's go now where we end and God begins.
Yes.
And I think that's what you mean by thinking biblically.
Absolutely.
It is just a different category. It's a different level. It is way up here.
It is.
You're like right here.
Absolutely. And I just chuckled at that because it's like, so that was from years ago. That was way before I was at Emmanuel, and I've seen that so many times. So it's like that has not changed. Praise God.
Yeah.
What else?
What else have I learned from Ray?
Yeah, what else have you learned from Ray?
So I'm going to highlight a few things that I wrote about in the article. I got the privilege of spending time with Ray. Like I said, when we would meet in his office in Bellevue and things like that, in a time of his life where he was, it's rare for a guy his age to plant a church, to start something brand new, and because at that point you're usually established. You're riding out the remaining years or whatever. Well, Ray doesn't ever stop growing is one thing I learned from him. We would do these, what we called them Emmanuel theology group. And it would be, do you remember that at all? We stopped that probably.
No, when I got there, it was men and women's theology.
Yeah, we had that, but this was an addition to it. And so what we would do is it would basically run like a semester long. Ray would get, he knows everybody in ministry, it feels like. And he'd get, top-notch scholars, pastors to come in and teach us for a day on a Saturday, Friday night, Saturday morning or something like that, or all day Saturday. And I remember we'd be sitting in here and we'd have, these guys who are they're just brilliant, and they'd be teaching us about something very specific. And the first semester of this, I don't know, maybe there are 15 of us. We met in that old granny white building in one of these rooms. And I mean, this is a guy who, there were these guys who, they obviously had very busy schedules. And I think back on it and I'm like, I cannot believe that they came to teach 15 guys at a church in Nashville. They'd be used to 1,500. This doesn't seem like a good use of their time, but I'm so thankful that they did. And what stuck out to me there, I have so many great memories about that, and I remember specific things that they taught me and all of that. But what I remember is the way Ray engaged with those guys. He was by far the best student in the room. Now, I have to think that Ray knew a lot of what they were saying, but you wouldn't know that. Mm-hmm. He was finding new things to learn. And he was asking questions, and he was pressing in, and he had his Bible open, he was circling things, and you could just tell he was. And Ray had a lot to do. I mean, he had a church to plant, he had a sermon to prepare, and here he is all day Saturday with these mostly young guys, just pouring himself into this. He never stopped growing. And I mean, if you even follow him on Instagram now, you see the same thing. Like He's in his study, he's got his books, and when he's writing a book, I mean, it's just covered. He's never taking the easy route.
Yes.
And that helped me because here was this older guy who he never felt as if he arrived at any kind of level of expertise in anything. he was still pushing. He was still pushing himself and still growing. And that matters because if we stop growing as leaders, then our people will stop growing. They will at some point cap out, right? Because we've capped out.
Yes.
So how would they not?
Yep.
Well, Ray helped me see, like, there is never an end, especially with the things of God. There's never an end to this. We can go as far as, as far as we want to go, as far as we'll push, if we just keep pressing in.
Yep.
But it wasn't just intellectual. It was also relational with Ray, in that he not only learned more about God from the Bible, but he learned, once again, about the heart of God for him. And I saw this when, again, we were meeting at a Starbucks, and I don't know what we were talking about. I can't remember. All I remember is the ride back to the church, and we were stopped at a light, and there was this one light on Old Hickory that just takes forever. As you're turning onto Old Hickory, it just takes forever. It always has. I guess it always will. I remember sitting at that light thinking, this takes forever. I'm not in a hurry to get out of the car with Ray at all. I just remember it. But why that's meaningful is because I remember asking Ray how he was doing in one particular area, and he just said, David, God is so patient. He's so patient. And he repeated that for like the length of the light, and which to me felt like eternity. And it wasn't until about the 5th or 6th time that he said it that actually it had an effect on me. And I started realizing, he is. Like, there's a glory in the patience of God. And that was Ray's way of saying, I haven't really changed very much since the last time we talked about this. I'm still struggling with that. But God is patient with me. He hasn't stopped loving me through that. He hasn't stopped caring about me through that. He's ministering to me right now in the midst of this struggle. And I felt like, gosh, not only is this guy way smarter than I am and still growing, but that has not removed him from this real experience with God. He's pressing into the heart of God and finding God responding and finding God caring for him. And it just made me feel like, okay, I'm going to be okay.
Right. Yes.
Like, because I see that Ray is okay with God.
Yes.
Maybe I'm going to be okay with
Absolutely.
God. It really helped me.
Yes.
And I doubt he remembers that. I mean, but I don't think I'll ever forget it. And I forget a lot of things.
Yeah.
We talked about thinking biblically. I remember him at our new member seminar. We were sitting there, and as I thought about it further, I think it was just a passing comment over lunch or something. But I remember Ray saying something about, people go on vacation, they don't even take their Bibles. And I remember chuckling to myself, kind of like this. I'm like, I don't think I've ever even thought to take my Bible on vacation. I mean, I might take a book or something, but But what that told me about Ray is that there is no way to separate the Bible and rest to Ray. The Bible is rest to Ray. It's not only this thing to pursue and press into, but it's the place at which he goes to find the rest of God. And there is no place at which in our lives at which we stop being Christians, at which we just we don't take a vacation from God. God doesn't take a vacation from us.
Yeah, thankfully.
Yeah, thankfully. And so like that, just like little things like that Ray would say or do as I was around him really made that's the thing. It's like, I don't know how many sermons from Ray I've heard. I remember lots of them and lots of things from them, but very few of them had the impact on me as these little just things that happened throughout my life with him.
Yes, exactly. And just to touch on that, the way he said that, do you say that was at lunch or in an officers meeting or something like that?
It was our new members seminar, and I think it was over lunch. We were talking about something, and he made that comment. Yeah.
So I don't want to put words in Ray's mouth because that may be not what he's getting at. However, it wouldn't shock me if what he wanted to convey was, hey, y'all, when you go on vacation, take your Bibles with you. Never take a vacation from God. That's how you should do it. Well, instead of that, it's like, man, some guys go on vacation and don't take their Bibles? Like, the point lands equally as strong, maybe even stronger, but there's a dignity to that way of communication that maybe gets damaged a little bit if it's like, hey, and guys, just, this is real important. I want to tell y'all, like, take, you know what I mean? Like, the point lands either way, but it's more careful. It's more, I don't know.
Well, and that's the thing that
lands.
I wonder if you experience this too. I think back on a lot of times that I had with Ray, and a lot of it in officer meetings, and think we were really working through something, and I find he corrected my thinking about so many things without explicitly saying, "Hey, David, time out. You're wrong there, and let me explain to you why you're wrong. Let me explain to it." He never. You could use this. He never embarrassed you.
Exactly.
He never belittled.
Yep.
He would listen and receive and give feedback without you feeling like you were ever even corrected, though you were.
Yes.
And I felt like I grew, and it would be weeks, months later before I would look back and think like, oh, I see what he did.
Exactly.
I see. I don't think and it's a way of finding a way of so that people can receive what you're saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
And receive the instruction that they need without being explicit about it. And
yes.
it was, once again, there's probably 1,000 things that he did like that he doesn't remember that I just carry. I'm like, oh, I was corrected by that.
Yes.
And maybe he intended it, maybe he didn't, but it sure helped me.
Exactly. Yes, it is that dignity. So it's it's a big deal for him to not make people feel ashamed, embarrassed. Right. That's a real key thing, and thankfully that's kind of stuck with the other leaders at Emmanuel too.
Yeah.
Another thing I learned from him is, he is unashamedly, diligently, effectively, constantly agitating for revival.
Yep.
It wears off.
Oh, it does.
He got to experience the Jesus movement in the 60s in California. So he's seen that Jesus can take over a town.
Right.
I have a hard time believing that.
I know, I do too.
But this book here, Jonathan Edwards on revival, talks about it. Man, I think about this a lot. And let me just read some of this because this shows you how it can happen. Mm-hmm. God can come into a city and rise above the threshold of non-ignorability, which that's just basically, you already know what that is, but this was a Ray thing. I don't know where he got it. Maybe it's original with him, but it's the idea that you can live in Nashville and not know about the local Rotary. Mm-hmm. You can live in Nashville and not know about Superica, even though that's a great new Mexican restaurant. You can live in Nashville and not know about my dentist, for example. There's a lot of things in Nashville that you can live in Nashville and not know about. But there's a few things that you really can't live in Nashville and not know about. Tennessee Titans, one of them. Right. Nashville Predators, probably another one. Country music, those things are above the threshold of non-ignorability in Nashville. And all we're asking for is that Jesus would be as known. Here's the way to put it. Is it asking too much for Jesus to be as known in Nashville as the Tennessee Titans? You know what I mean? Yeah. Are we asking too much for Jesus to rise above the threshold of non-ignorability in Nashville, Tennessee? Because unfortunately, you can live in Nashville, Tennessee in 2020 and not hear or know about Jesus.
Yeah. I think about that all the time. And I even think about, as hearing you say that, when we, and I'll let you read this.
Go ahead.
When we were working on crafting the mission statement of Emmanuel.
Oh, were you part of that?
Making the real Jesus non-ignorable in our city and far beyond. I remember all of the iterations that Ray brought back. And I remember when we kind of settled on this one. And it was all Ray bringing. Our contributions were almost nothing to this, but at least in my memory, they were almost nothing to this. And I remember talking about the word non-ignorable. And I remember thinking, why say it that way? Because that itself is non-ignorable. Exactly. There's a way of saying it that even itself makes it rise to closer to that level of non-ignorability.
Yes.
And so Ray was always thinking and is always thinking in those kinds of, and that's another thing that sets him apart from other people that I know is everything is about Jesus to Ray. He wants Jesus to be the most famous person. He wants Jesus to be known. He doesn't care at all if he's known, if Ray Ortlund is known, or even if Emmanuel Church is known, apart from the name of Jesus.
Yes.
It matters because Jesus matters. But anyways, it just made me think of that non-ignorable it's just such an interesting way to say things. And I remember a conversation about that, but it was because
100%.
even that has something to say.
100%. So here's what he's agitating for, basically, because this is what happened in the day of Jonathan Edwards in Northampton, Massachusetts. Yeah. This work of God, as it was carried on, and the number of true saints multiplied, soon made a glorious alteration in the town, so that in the spring and summer following 1735, the town seemed to be full of the presence of God. It never was so full of love, nor of joy, and yet so full of distress as it was then. There were remarkable tokens of God's presence in almost every house. It was a time of joy in families on account of salvation being brought unto them, parents rejoicing over their children as newborn, husbands over their wives, wives over their husbands. The goings of God were then seen in his sanctuary. God's day was a delight, and his tabernacles were amiable. Our public assemblies were then beautiful. The congregation was alive in God's service, everyone earnestly intent on the public worship, every hearer eager to drink in the words of the minister as they came from his mouth. The assembly in general were, from time to time, in tears while the word was preached, some weeping with sorrow and distress, others with joy and love, others with pity and concern for the soul of their neighbors. And then a little different section here. Presently upon this, a great and earnest concern about the great things of religion and the eternal world became universal in all parts of the town, and among persons of all degrees and all ages. The noise amongst the dry bones waxed louder and louder. All other talk but about spiritual and eternal things was soon thrown by. All the conversation in all companies and upon all occasions was upon these things only, unless so much as was necessary for people carrying on their ordinary secular business. Yeah. And I just remember thinking, maybe even saying to Ray at some point, Ray, look, man, if you really believe this can happen today, then I guess I'm going to be dumb enough to believe it too. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like that is... Yeah. He genuinely believes that this can take over Nashville again one day. Yeah. And I believe it too. Right? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I needed a lot of growth and faith in these areas, but I know that God can. Right. But I haven't experienced this in my 35 years of life. But Ray has. Other people have. Right. We have accounts of it. Like this happened. This was a city in Northampton, Massachusetts, where Jesus became the talk of the town. Right. But it's also his. So yeah, this whole thing of like agitating for revival. It's a big learning from Ray. It's actually one of the things I respect about him the most. And he shared recently on his wife Janny's podcast. He Restores My Soul, I think it's called. That his mission. I'll just read it. He says, my mission, Ray's mission in life and death is to serve as a living stimulant towards the next great awakening in America and to the ends of the earth. Yeah. So his life mission is for this. You know, that's why that's why it's so central to everything that he does, I believe. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That was a huge thing that I learned from Ray as well. That I never had a category for revival at all until I met Ray. Like it just wasn't a thing. I didn't know anything about it. And I remember early on in Emmanuel, you can't spend very long with Ray without hearing about revival. And I remember it was a men's theology on Tuesday night where he showed us this talk by J. Edwin Orr on basically just history of revival. And I don't know. It's like this video is probably from the 70s. It's grainy. We pulled it up on YouTube and it was just like this terrible quality. But I remember the impact that it made on us. And it was, here's what God has done in the past. And then it kind of left of, what can he do in the future? And there was this almost like tangible sense of like, we wanted to reach out and grab that, whatever that was. And so for a little while, I remember there was a guy saying, well, how can we make space at Emmanuel to pray for that? And so we started meeting, I think at the time it was maybe on Wednesday mornings at 6:00 in the morning or something to pray for revival for an hour. Then we moved that to Friday night. It had as many different iterations. And I think, is there still something like that happens on, or maybe not
no,
these days,
not like that right now.
But I remember my memory says it was at least a year, maybe longer, where every week we would gather and we would pray for an hour. Have you ever sat and just prayed for an hour early in the morning with other men? Like, it's not the most, sometimes we'd go into it was that old Granny White building, we'd go in and be freezing cold. And that thing doesn't heat up quick. Or it'd be really hot. And that thing don't cool off quick. And, it's early and there weren't even a lot of people. It would be like, maybe we max out at 6. I don't know. It just wasn't a lot. But Ray was willing to give his time to that. And so I thought, I need to be able to be willing to give my time to that too. And I remember showing up and praying. And I remember learning how to pray in new ways by listening to Ray pray for revival during that time. And just the boldness with which he would approach God. Like, you can say that to God, and it wouldn't be anything that I would think would be controversial or anything, but it would be like, Lord, I'm not okay not seeing events like what we see in the book of Acts.
Yes.
And I was like, gosh, what a way to say that. But that is in the Bible. Can we not expect something of it now?
Mm-hmm.
And who's going to give that other than God? So why not go to Him and pray for it? So that agitation for revival, that is something that has always been there with Ray.
Yes, absolutely. We already talked about the beauty and effect, just the right words, just the right way, just the right time. I just think he's very good at that. This is an interesting one that I have. So, and this is a learning. Like I think people need a purpose that's bigger than the constant happiness or approval of those around you. And he has that. And I want to grow in that area. When I had reached out to him about interning just for free at church, because I wanted to help out however I could and rub shoulders with him and TJ. And, so of course we're talking it through almost like you would for a job, although, it's no big deal if it didn't work out or whatever. It's not like this is a job or, it's not quite to that level, but still we want to set the expectations going in. And he said, me and TJ are fine. They don't need me to be happy for them to be happy. Mm. And man, I really respected that.
Yeah.
I think he knew he could say it to me maybe. Cause there's some people you probably wouldn't say that to.
Right.
But that really resonated with me, and I kind of took that as a lesson that I need to have. Of course, you're paying attention to people around you. Of course, you're being self-aware. You're not trying to be belligerent and so forth. But the message was he doesn't need me to be happy for him to be happy.
Right.
I really respect that. Yeah. Actually.
Yeah. No, that is interesting. That is there's this settledness with who Ray has a settledness about who he is.
Yes.
And that's something that I long for. I want to be okay with who I am, and not even with who I am, as if I've made myself who God has made me.
Yes.
Right. And repentant of my sins, but fully accepting of my standing with God.
Mm-hmm. I'm
not out to prove anything to anybody. I don't need further proof that I am justified because I have that.
That's right.
I have this okayness with God, and I can operate out of that, not seeking it.
Yes.
That's a big deal. And I think that plays into something I learned from Ray too, of you can actually enjoy life. Life can be enjoyed. You can have a cup of coffee and think about the wonderful taste of the coffee and rejoice in that. It doesn't have to just be, that's just part of my day. There is nothing that is just part of your day. It's all from the hand of God, which sounds like the book of Ecclesiastes, because it is. But Ray helped me see that in ways that I think, because maybe part of my upbringing in the church that I had, the exposure that I had to the church, I felt like I constantly felt like this guilt for enjoying the things of this world, And I think a lot of people feel that too, as if we have to set our heights always above, and we can't, I love baseball, and I love just to sit and watch a baseball game. A baseball game's slow, and it's, 4 hours long, and there's so many things I could do with my time. Is it okay for me to waste time watching a baseball game? And Ray would say, well, do you receive it as a gift from God?
Mm-hmm.
Then yes, you enjoy it to the glory of God. And it's not as if you're like Christianizing baseball. You're enjoying what it is for what it is, receiving it as from the hand of God.
Yes.
And so, I mean, that has implications to all of life. And that really helped me feel like, Ray loves 60s music. He loves Bob Dylan. He loves the Beatles. He loves Beach Boys. He loves CCR. He talks about it all the time. And you're like, gosh, Ray he's a redneck hippie. And he loves his. He's
a well-educated redneck hippie.
Yeah, he is. He likes to go hunting. Like there are very earthly things that Ray really rejoices in, but he rejoices in them in the right way.
Yeah. And
seeing him rejoice in those helps. It's always helped me be like, okay, if Ray can go sit in a deer stand on a cold Saturday morning and just give that over to the Lord, I can watch a baseball game. Give that over to the Lord.
Yes.
It felt like there was permission to enjoy the things that God gives.
I want to mention just 3 more learnings from Ray.
Okay.
And then we can move on. The idea that it's not about balance, but it's about priorities. I won't say a whole lot about this because people can actually if you just go on YouTube and search Ray Ortlund on why Ray Ortlund doesn't like the term balance. I did a podcast with him a while ago, and that's my most popular YouTube clip. And he talks through why he doesn't like the word balance. He thinks it's about priorities and not balance. He thinks balance is a weak word. That was a very new thought to me when I'd first heard him talk about that. Back to communication. This is another thing that I think about this a lot actually. And but he will, for public announcements, he's going to always convey the the point is always going to be communicated in the affirmative, never in the negative.
Right.
And so that could look like something like, let's say, for example, just a random example could be, okay, there's a situation or a service or a gathering or something where maybe it's best the kids don't come. You know what I mean? If you don't think it through, you could just be making announcements like we're going to do such and such on this date, and please don't bring your kids.
Right.
That's communicating in the negative. Mm-hmm. Or you can say we're going to do such and such on such and such a date. For this event, we think it'd be better if we could just enjoy time together as adults. You've said the same thing, but you feel very differently about it. Exactly so the idea of communicating the positive and not the negative is, I think is key. And then the last one is the idea of using a tangible change to reinforce an intangible change. And and that's going to look something along the lines of if you have a structural change, it could look something along the lines of, all right, we're going to hire someone new, and so we're going to redo the offices. We wouldn't really have to, but we're going to because this kind of marks them coming in. Now they're a part of the staff, or whatever. You're going to have this thing of sermon series, and so you make something change in the sanctuary or in the foyer or something to kind of, we don't do that every time, Emmanuel, by the way, but using a physical change to reinforce could be a structural change or a leadership change or an intangible change. Mm-hmm. I think that's actually a very effective leadership principle. And that's not just, I don't know if that thought is original with Ray, but I know that use of that principle that's actually used fairly widespread. Yeah. I've heard the story of work with someone who was part of the Dave Ramsey leadership team, and one time Dave wanted to communicate a point, and everyone came into staff meeting. I think at the time there's maybe just 300 people working there. Now there's a lot more, but everyone came into this weekly meeting, and all the chairs were faced the opposite direction. And and everyone's like, oh, what do? You normally have your seat, you kind of know what to expect, and you walk in, all the chairs are faced the wrong direction, and so everyone kind of finds their seat. And then Dave walks in and communicates that someone is either coming on board or leaving, I forget which, but like from this point on, things are going to be different around here. Yeah. It's using a physical change to kind of reinforce an intangible change. And Ray's used that before too. I think that can be real effective.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
So yeah, that is, oh man, it's quite a lot.
It's quite a lot.
I started keeping
and almost nothing at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I started keeping a track of favorite quotes from Ray.
Yeah.
I don't know when I'm going to use them, but he kind of speaks in like Twitterverse almost. If you think about it, it's easy to kind of pull quotes out.
Yeah,
it's probably intentional as well.
Yeah.